Robert Williams never thought life would hit him this hard. 2 years ago, he was living what most people would call a perfect life. He had a loving wife, Maria, a beautiful 16-year-old daughter named Lisa, and a steady job as a guidance counselor at the local high school. They weren't rich, but they were happy. Had their little traditions: Sunday morning pancakes, family movie nights, and those long walks around the neighborhood where Maria would point out every flower she wanted to plant in their garden. Then everything changed in what felt like a single moment, though it was really 8 long, painful months. Maria's cough, which they thought was just allergies, turned out to be something much worse. Stage 3 lung cancer, the doctor said, even though Maria had never smoked a day in her life. The words hit Robert like a truck, but Maria, being Maria, just squeezed his hand and said they'd fight it together, and fight they did. Robert watched his strong, vibrant wife go through chemotherapy sessions that left her weak and sick. He held her hair back when she was throwing up, helped her to the bathroom when she was too weak to walk alone, and tried to stay positive when she lost all her beautiful long hair. Lisa, their teenage daughter, stepped up in ways that broke Robert's heart. She learned to cook, helped with the laundry, and never complained when family movie nights turned into quiet evenings at the hospital. The medical bills started piling up faster than Robert could count them. Even with insurance, the treatments were expensive. Experimental drugs that might help weren't covered. Special diet the nutritionist recommended cost more than their usual grocery budget. Robert found himself working extra hours, tutoring students after school, and taking on weekend jobs just to keep up with the payments. Maria fought hard for 8 months. She had good days when she'd laugh at Robert's terrible jokes, and bad days when she could barely open her eyes. Robert learned to read her moods, to know when she needed space and when she needed him to hold her close. He became an expert at giving injections, managing medications, and translating medical terms that the doctors threw around like everyone should understand them. The worst part wasn't watching Maria get sick. It was watching her worry about them. Even when she was at her weakest, she was concerned about how Robert and Lisa would manage without her. She made Robert promise to take care of Lisa, to make sure she went to college, to not let grief consume him. She wrote letters to Lisa for future birthdays, graduations, and her wedding day. She organized their finances and made sure Robert knew where everything was. When Maria passed away on a cold Tuesday morning in February, Robert felt like someone had turned off all the lights in the world. The funeral was a blur of casseroles, flowers, and people saying they were sorry for his loss. Everyone meant well, but their words felt empty. How could they understand what it felt like to lose the person who made everything make sense? After the funeral, Robert thought the hardest part was over. He was wrong. Grief, he discovered, wasn't just sadness. It was forgetting Maria was gone and reaching for the phone to call her about something funny that happened at work. It was cooking dinner for 3 people out of habit, then staring at the extra plate. It was lying awake at night in a bed that felt too big and too quiet. Lisa was grieving too. But she was also 17 and trying to figure out her senior year of high school, college applications, and life without her mom. Robert watched her struggle and felt helpless. How could he guide her through something he was barely surviving himself? Some days she'd come home from school and just cry. Other days she'd throw herself into studying or cleaning the house, anything to stay busy. Medical bills didn't stop when Maria died. If anything, they seemed to multiply. The final weeks in the hospital, the specialists, the medications, the funeral costs, it all added up to a mountain of debt that kept Robert awake at night. He'd sit at the kitchen table with a calculator and a stack of bills, trying to figure out how to pay for everything while still putting money aside for Lisa's college education. His job as a guidance counselor suddenly felt different too. Before, when students came to him with problems, he could offer advice and perspective. Now when a kid talked about family problems or feeling lost, Robert felt it in his chest, understood their pain in a way he never had before. Sometimes he had to excuse himself to the bathroom just to pull himself together. The house felt different too. Maria's presence was everywhere, her coffee mug in the cabinet, her books on the nightstand, her plants that Robert was somehow keeping alive. Friends and family kept suggesting he should move, start fresh, somewhere new. But this house held all their memories. This was where they'd brought Lisa home as a baby, where they'd celebrated birthdays and anniversaries where Maria had spent her last good days. Money became a constant worry. Robert had always been good with finances, but the medical bills had wiped out their savings. He was behind on the mortgage, the credit cards were maxed out, and Lisa's college fund had been emptied. Months ago, he picked up extra work wherever he could find it, tutoring, substitute teaching on weekends, even helping neighbors with yard work. Pride didn't matter anymore. What mattered was keeping the lights on and making sure Lisa could still go to college like Maria wanted. Despite everything, Robert kept volunteering at the community center downtown. It was something he'd started years ago, helping kids with homework and job applications. After Maria died, some people told him he should focus on himself and Lisa, but the volunteer work was one of the few things that still made him feel useful. Like he was making a difference in the world. The community center was in a rough part of town, serving families who were struggling just to get by. Robert had always felt comfortable there, working with kids who needed someone to believe in them. Now, sitting across from teenagers who were dealing with poverty, family problems, and uncertain futures, he realized he understood their struggles more than ever. Every evening, Robert would come home exhausted, not just from work, but from carrying the weight of grief and financial stress. Lisa would usually be doing homework at the kitchen table, the same table where Robert spent hours trying to figure out how to pay their bills. They'd eat dinner together, usually something simple, and try to have normal conversations about school and friends. But there was always this underlying sadness, this missing piece that would never be filled. 2 years had passed since Maria's death. Robert was still figuring out how to live without her. Some days were better than others. Some days he could laugh at something on TV or enjoy a conversation with a colleague. Other days, the grief would hit him like a wave, unexpected and overwhelming. But he kept going, kept getting up every morning, and putting one foot in front of the other. For Lisa, for Maria's memory, and for the students who needed someone to believe in them. He didn't know it yet, but his biggest challenge and his greatest opportunity to heal was just around the corner. It was a rainy Thursday evening when Robert first noticed the young woman sitting alone in the corner of the community center. She came in quietly, almost like she was trying not to be seen, and headed straight to the computer section. Robert was helping a group of teenagers with their job applications when he saw her struggling with the keyboard, her fingers hesitating over the keys, like she wasn't sure what to type. The community center had been Robert's second home for the past 5 years. After his regular job at the high school, he'd come here 3 evenings a week to help kids and young adults with everything from homework to job searches. It was his way of giving back, and honestly, it helped him feel useful during those dark months when grief made everything else seem pointless. This girl looked different from the usual crowd. She was probably 19 or 20, with long black hair that she kept tucking behind her ears nervously. Her clothes were clean but old, the kind you'd find at thrift stores. What struck Robert most was how she carried herself, like someone who was used to making herself small, trying not to take up too much space in the world. Over the next few weeks, Robert started noticing her pattern. She'd arrive around 6:30, always alone, and work on the computers for exactly 2 hours. She was polite but quiet, answering questions with short responses when other volunteers tried to help her. Robert learned her name was Mia. She was taking online courses to become a certified nursing assistant. One evening, Robert was organizing the supply closet when he overheard Mia on the phone in the hallway. She was speaking quietly, but the voice was strained, almost pleading. She kept saying things like, "Please, just give me more time, and I'm trying my best to figure something out." When she came back into the main room, her eyes were red, and she was blinking rapidly like she was trying not to cry. Robert had spent years working with teenagers and young adults who were going through tough times. He developed a sense for when someone was really struggling versus just having a bad day. Something about Mia's situation felt serious, kind of serious that kept him awake at night wondering if there was something he should be doing to help. The breakthrough came. 3 weeks later, Mia had been working on her computer as usual when suddenly she put her head in her hands and started crying quietly. The few other people in the center were focused on their own work, But Robert couldn't ignore someone in distress. He walked over and gently asked if she was okay. At first, Mia just shook her head and tried to wipe her tears away. But something about Robert's gentle manner, maybe it was all those years of being a guidance counselor, or maybe it was his own recent experience with feeling lost and overwhelmed, made her start talking. The story came out slowly, pieces, like she was afraid to say too much at once. Mia lived with her parents and two younger brothers in a small apartment across town. Her father had been laid off from his construction job 8 months ago and hadn't been able to find steady work since. Her mother cleaned houses, but it wasn't nearly enough to cover rent, groceries, and utilities for a family of 5. Things had gotten so bad that they were 3 months behind on rent. The landlord had already given them 2 notices. An eviction seemed inevitable. Mia's father, a proud man who had always been the provider for his family, was becoming desperate and angry. He'd started drinking more, and the stress was tearing the family apart. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what her father had decided was the solution to their problems. Mia's hands were shaking as she told Robert about the arrangement her father had made. There was a man, much older, who owned a few small businesses in their neighborhood. He'd known the family for years, and when he heard about their financial troubles, he'd made an offer. He would pay off their debts, cover the back rent, and give them enough money to get back on their feet. In exchange, he wanted to marry Mia. Robert felt his stomach drop. "How old is this man?" he asked carefully. 42, Mia whispered. "He has 2 kids from his first marriage who are almost my age. The man wasn't necessarily a bad person," Mia explained. "He'd never been inappropriate with her, and he seemed to genuinely want to help her family. But the idea of marrying someone she barely knew, someone old enough to be her father, made her feel sick. She'd been having panic attacks just thinking about it. Her mother was against the arrangement, but she felt powerless to stop it. In their culture, the father made these kinds of decisions, and arguing too much would only make things worse for everyone. Mia's younger brothers didn't fully understand what was happening, but they could feel the tension in the house. Mia had been trying to find alternatives. That's why she was at the community center every evening, taking online courses and applying for jobs. She thought maybe if she could get certified as a nursing assistant and find work quickly, she could help support the family, and her father would change his mind. But the certification program would take 4 more months to complete, and even then the starting salary wouldn't be enough to solve their immediate crisis. "The wedding is supposed to happen in 6 weeks, Mia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Oh, my father says we can't wait any longer. The landlord is going to evict us next month if we don't pay what we owe." Robert sat quietly for a moment, processing everything Mia had told him. He'd encountered difficult family situations in his work before, but this felt different. This was a young woman whose entire future was about to be decided by circumstances beyond her control. He thought about his own daughter, Lisa, who was the same age as Mia. Lisa was applying to colleges, dreaming about her career, dating a boy from her math class. She had choices, options, a future full of possibilities. The idea of Lisa being forced into marriage with a stranger to solve the family's financial problems was unthinkable. But Robert also understood desperation. He'd been there himself, sitting at his kitchen table with a stack of medical bills, wondering how he was going to keep his house and pay for Lisa's education. He knew what it felt like when you'd exhausted all your options, were facing the loss of everything you'd worked for. The difference was that Robert had never considered sacrificing his daughter's future to solve his problems, but then again he'd had other resources, other options that maybe Mia's family didn't have. Mia was still crying quietly, but now she looked almost relieved to have told someone. "I don't know what to do," she said. "I love my family and I don't want us to lose our home, but I can't imagine spending the rest of my life married to someone I don't love, someone I barely know." Robert handed her some tissues from his desk drawer. "Have you talked to anyone else about this? A counselor, a teacher, anyone who might be able to help?" Mia shook her head. "Who would I tell? And what could they do anyway? We need money, real money, and soon. Nobody's going to just give us thousands of dollars to solve our problems." Night, Robert drove home thinking about Mia's situation. He kept imagining her in 6 weeks, walking down the aisle to marry a man she didn't love, giving up her dreams of becoming a nurse, sacrificing her entire future for her family's immediate needs. When he got home, Lisa was studying at the kitchen table as usual. She looked up and smiled when he walked in, complaining about her calculus homework and asking if he wanted to watch a movie with her later. Looking at his daughter so young, so full of possibilities, Robert felt his heart break a little more for Mia. He couldn't stop thinking about it. Here was a young woman who was working hard, trying to build a better life for herself and her family. But circumstances were about to force her into a situation that would change everything. And somewhere in the back of his mind, Robert started wondering if there might be another way. Robert couldn't sleep that night. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about Mia's tear-streaked face and the hopelessness in her voice. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw his own daughter Lisa at that age, and his chest tightened. With a protective anger he hadn't felt in years. By 3 in the morning, he was sitting at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a notepad, trying to figure out if there was anything he could realistically do to help. The numbers were daunting. Mia's family owed thousands in back rent, plus utilities, plus everyday expenses. Even if Robert emptied what little was left in his savings account, it wouldn't be enough to solve their immediate crisis. But as the sun came up, an idea began forming in his mind. It wasn't about giving them money they didn't have. It was about giving Mia time and opportunity the next evening at the community center. Robert waited until Mia had settled in at her usual computer. Instead of working on his own tasks, he pulled up a chair beside her. "I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday," he said quietly. "Would you be open to discussing some alternatives?" Mia looked around nervously as if someone might overhear them. "I don't think there are any alternatives. My father has already made up his mind." "What if there was a way for you to finish your nursing program faster and start earning money sooner?" Robert asked. "What if instead of taking 4 more months, you could be working in 6 weeks?" Mia's eyes widened slightly. "How?" "The program requires a certain number of hours, and I can only study in the evenings because I help my mother during the day." Robert had done his research the night before. There's an intensive program at the community college. It's full-time for 6 weeks, and it costs more than the online version. But you could be certified and working by the time your father wants this wedding to happen. "But I can't afford the intensive program," Mia said, her shoulders sagging. "And even if I could, I can't quit helping my mother with her cleaning jobs. That's the only income we have right now." This was the part of Robert's plan that had kept him awake all night. Oh, what if I helped cover the cost of the program? What if there was a way for you to live somewhere temporarily so you could focus on studying full-time? Mia stared at him like he was speaking a foreign language. "I don't understand. Why would you do that? You barely know me." Robert had asked himself the same question a dozen times. Why was he getting involved in a stranger's problems when he had plenty of his own? But every time he thought about walking away, he remembered Maria's voice during those last weeks, talking about how important it was to help people when you could, to use whatever privilege and resources you had to make a difference. "Because everyone deserves a chance to choose their own future," he said simply. "And because I have a daughter your age, and I'd want someone to help her if she was in your situation." The conversation that followed was careful and awkward. Robert explained that he had a guest room in his house that wasn't being used. Mia could stay there temporarily while she completed the intensive nursing program. She could help with some household tasks in exchange for room and board, making it a fair arrangement rather than charity. Once she was certified and working, she'd be able to contribute to her family's expenses in a meaningful way. Mia listened with a mixture of hope and suspicion. "My father would never agree to let me live with a stranger, especially a man. That's why we need to present it the right way," Robert said. "Not as me helping you, but as a work-study arrangement. You'd be working as a household assistant while completing your education. It's a legitimate setup that gives you job experience while you're studying." But Robert knew the real challenge would be convincing Mia's father, a proud man who was probably feeling desperate and cornered. That's why. Robert's next suggestion surprised even himself. "I think I should meet with your parents," he said. "Not to interfere with their decisions, but to present this as a business arrangement. Your father needs to see that this could solve their problems without sacrificing your future." Mia shook her head immediately. He won't listen. He's already committed to the other arrangement, and he doesn't trust outsiders, especially when it comes to family matters. Robert understood that trust would be the biggest obstacle. From Mia's father's perspective, Robert was a complete stranger offering help that seemed too good to be true. In the father's shoes, Robert would probably be suspicious too. "What if I met with your mother first?" Robert suggested. "Mothers have a way of understanding these things differently. If she thinks this could work, maybe she could help present it to your father." The next few days were tense with planning and preparation. Mia was torn between hope and fear of disappointing her family further if this plan didn't work. Robert found himself second-guessing the wisdom of getting so involved in someone else's family drama. Lisa noticed her father's distraction immediately. "Dad, you've been weird all week. Are you okay?" Robert realized he hadn't told his daughter about Mia or his plan to help her. That evening, over dinner, he explained the situation carefully, watching Lisa's reactions. "So you want this girl to come live with us?" Lisa asked. "Temporarily, yes. She'd stay in the guest room while she finishes her nursing program." "It would just be for 6 weeks." Lisa was quiet for a moment, processing. Then she surprised Robert with her response. "Mom would have done the same thing, wouldn't she? She knew someone who needed help like this." Robert felt a lump in his throat. "Yes, I think she would have." The meeting with Mia's mother, Carmen, took place at a small cafe near the community center. Carmen was a small woman with kind eyes and calloused hands from years of cleaning houses. She spoke English well, but carefully. Choosing her words with precision, Robert explained his proposal, emphasizing the practical benefits. Mia would complete her certification quickly, start earning money immediately, and be able to contribute to the family's income within 2 months. The arrangement would give her work experience and references for future jobs. Carmen listened without interrupting, occasionally asking clarifying questions. "Why do you want to help my daughter?" she finally asked. "What do you get from this?" It was a fair question, and Robert had prepared for it. "I lost my wife 2 years ago," he said. "Before she died, she made me promise to take care of people when I could. Your daughter is working hard to improve her life. She deserves a chance to succeed." Carmen's eyes softened slightly, but she remained cautious. "My husband is a good man, but he's scared. He sees this marriage as the only way to save our family. He won't want to hear about other options, and we need to show him that this option is more practical," Robert said. "In 6 weeks, Mia could be earning steady money for years to come. The marriage arrangement only solves your immediate problem. This solves your long-term problem." Carmen agreed to think about it and discuss it with Mia. 2 days later, she called Robert with a proposal of her own. She would present the idea to her husband, but she wanted Robert to be there for the conversation. She felt that her husband needed to meet the man who was offering to help their daughter. To judge his character for himself, the meeting was scheduled for the following Sunday afternoon at Mia's family apartment. Robert spent the weekend preparing for what he knew would be one of the most important conversations of his life. He wasn't just trying to help Mia anymore. He was trying to change the entire trajectory of a family's future. As he drove across town that Sunday, Robert thought about all the ways this could go wrong. Mia's father could refuse to even consider the arrangement, could be offended by what he saw as interference from an outsider. Cultural differences might be too significant to bridge. But Robert also thought about Mia's face when she talked about her dreams of becoming a nurse and about Lisa's words about what Maria would have done. Sometimes he realized you had to take risks to do what was right. The apartment building where Mia's family lived was older than Robert had expected, with peeling paint on the walls and a broken intercom system. He climbed 3 flights of stairs, carrying a folder with information about the nursing program and references from his work as a guidance counselor. His heart was pounding, not from the climb, but from the weight of what this conversation could mean for everyone involved. Carmen answered the door, her expression nervous but determined. Behind her, Robert could see a small living room with mismatched furniture and family photos covering one wall. The apartment was clean but cramped, clearly meant for fewer people than the 5 who lived there. Mia's father, Diego, stood when Robert entered. He was a tall man with weathered hands and a guarded expression. Robert could see where Mia got her careful way of watching people, as if she was always trying to read the room before deciding how to respond. The conversation started awkwardly, with Diego asking direct questions about Robert's job, his family, and his reasons for wanting to help. Robert answered honestly, talking about his work as a guidance counselor and his experience helping young people navigate difficult situations. He mentioned his own daughter and his wife's death, explaining how those experiences had shaped his desire to help others when possible. "You have no children of your own to worry about?" Diego asked, his tone skeptical. "I have a daughter who's 17, Robert replied. "She's actually looking forward to having someone closer to her age around the house for a while." Diego's expression softened slightly at this. The idea of Robert having his own child to protect seemed to make him more trustworthy in Diego's eyes. The real breakthrough came when Robert pulled out his folder and started explaining the nursing program in detail. He'd researched average salaries for certified nursing assistants in their area, the job growth projections, and the long-term career opportunities. He showed Diego numbers, real numbers, that demonstrated how much money Mia could earn over the next 5 years if she completed her certification. "This is more than the other arrangement would provide," Diego said quietly, studying the papers. "And it's something she earns herself," Carmen added, speaking up for the first time since the conversation began. "Something no one can take away from her." The discussion went on for 2 hours. Diego asked tough questions about the living arrangement, about supervision, about what would happen if the plan didn't work out. Robert answered each question patiently, understanding that this man was trying to protect his daughter in the only way he knew how. Finally, Diego turned to Mia, who had been sitting quietly throughout most of the conversation.
What do you want
to do?" he asked. "I want to try," Mia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I want to become a nurse." 2 weeks later, Mia moved into the guest room at Robert's house. The first few days were awkward for everyone. Mia was polite but distant, clearly overwhelmed by the sudden change in her circumstances. She'd wake up early to help with breakfast, then spend the day at the intensive nursing program, come home to study quietly in her room. Lisa, Robert's daughter, was the first to break through Mia's reserve. She knocked on Mia's door one evening and asked if she needed help with anything. When Mia mentioned she was struggling with some of the medical terminology, Lisa offered to quiz her with flashcards. "I'm pretty good at memorizing stuff," Lisa said. "It's basically like learning vocabulary for a foreign language, right?" Watching his daughter help Mia study, Robert felt something shift in the house. For the first time in 2 years, there was a sense of purpose and energy that had been missing since Maria's death. Lisa seemed happier, more engaged, and Mia was slowly starting to relax. The breakthrough came during the 3rd week. Mia had been having a particularly difficult day at school, struggling with a practical exam that she'd failed twice. She came home frustrated and close to tears, convinced that she wasn't smart enough to become a nurse. Robert found her sitting at the kitchen table, staring at her textbooks with defeat written all over her face. "I don't think I can do this," she said when Robert sat down beside her. "Maybe my father was right. Maybe I should just accept that some people aren't meant for certain things." Robert recognized the expression on her face. It was the same look he'd seen in his bathroom mirror countless times after Maria died. The look of someone who'd given up on themselves. "Can I tell you something about my wife?" Robert asked. Mia nodded, setting down her pen. "Maria wanted to be a teacher when she first went to college, but she failed her student teaching semester the first time. Her supervising teacher told her she didn't have what it took to manage a classroom. Maria came home crying, convinced she was stupid and worthless. What did she do? She took the semester again, and she failed again. The second supervising teacher said the same thing, that she didn't have the natural ability to be a teacher." Mia looked confused. "But you said she was a teacher?" "She was. She taught 3rd grade for 15 years and was one of the best teachers in the district. But it took her 3 tries to pass student teaching, and she had to work twice as hard as everyone else to get there." Robert pulled out his phone and showed Mia a photo of Maria in her classroom, surrounded by smiling 8-year-olds. "The difference between people who succeed and people who don't isn't natural ability," Robert continued. "It's the willingness to keep trying when things get hard. Maria used to say that failure wasn't falling down, It was staying down. That night, Robert heard Mia studying in her room until almost midnight. The next morning, she was up early, reviewing her notes over breakfast. When she came home from school that day, she was smiling. "I passed the practical exam," she announced. "Not just passed, I got an A." Lisa cheered and hugged her, and Robert felt his eyes water slightly. It had been a long time since he'd felt this proud of someone. As the weeks passed, the house began to feel like a home again. Mia would help with dinner, sharing stories about her clinical rotations and the patients she was learning to care for. Lisa would complain about her high school drama. Mia would offer advice from the perspective of someone who dealt with much bigger problems. Robert found himself laughing more often, engaged in conversations that weren't about bills or grief or just getting through another day. The three of them developed routines. Sunday morning pancakes, which had been a tradition with Maria, became a weekly event again. Mia would make coffee the way she'd learned from her mother, strong and sweet. Lisa would tell them about her college applications and her plans for the future. Robert would share stories from his work or updates about Mia's family. Mia's mother visited twice a week, and Robert could see the relief in Carmen's eyes as she watched her daughter flourish. Diego came once, awkward but genuine in his thanks to Robert for keeping his word about taking care of Mia, but the most significant change was in Robert himself. For 2 years, he'd been going through the motions of living, focused on survival and basic responsibilities. Having Mia in the house had given him a sense of purpose he'd forgotten he could feel. He wasn't just helping a young woman achieve her dreams, he was rediscovering his own capacity for hope. One evening, as they sat around the dinner table, Mia looked at Robert and Lisa with tears in her eyes. "I never thought I'd say this," she said, "but I'm glad everything happened the way it did. Not the bad parts, but this part. Being here with you both. I feel like I can breathe again." Lisa reached over and squeezed Mia's hand. "We're glad you're here too." Robert nodded, thinking about Maria and how proud she would be of all of them. They'd found their way back to being a family, just not the family any of them had expected. 2 years later, Robert stood in the kitchen, making his famous Sunday morning pancakes. But this time, the house was buzzing with an energy he hadn't felt in years. Lisa was home from her first year of college, full of stories about her dorm friends. In her psychology classes, Mia was getting ready for her shift at the regional medical center, where she'd been working as a certified nursing assistant for over a year and a half. The transformation in all their lives had been remarkable. It hadn't happened overnight. Those first few months after Mia completed her nursing program had been challenging in ways Robert hadn't expected. Mia's certification exam results came on a Tuesday afternoon. Robert was at work when his phone buzzed with a text message that simply said, "I passed," followed by about 20 excited emojis. He'd excused himself from a faculty meeting to call her back, and hearing the joy and relief in her voice had made him realize how invested he'd become in her success. The job search had been the next hurdle. Despite having her certification, Mia was competing with people who had more experience or had graduated from longer programs. She faced rejection after rejection, and Robert watched her confidence waver with each thanks but no thanks email. It was Lisa who came up with the idea that changed everything. During winter break, she suggested that Mia should apply to the hospital where Robert's insurance company was based, the same hospital where Maria had received treatment. Robert had maintained relationships with several nurses there, and Lisa thought those connections might help. "It's not using unfair advantages," Lisa had argued when Mia hesitated. "It's networking, which is how most people find good jobs anyway." The interview at Regional Medical Center went well. It's partly because Mia's genuine compassion for patients shone through, and partly because the nursing supervisor remembered Robert from the many months he'd spent in the hospital with Maria. She was impressed that he'd taken in a young woman to help her achieve her goals. Mia's first day at work was terrifying for her, but Robert and Lisa had celebrated like she'd won the lottery. They'd made a special dinner and bought her a small gift, a professional stethoscope with her name engraved on it. Mia had cried when she opened it, saying it made her feel like a real nurse. The changes in Mia over those first months of working were incredible to watch. She gained confidence in her abilities, started speaking up more during dinner conversations, and began making friends with her coworkers. She'd come home with stories about patients she'd helped and procedures she'd learned to assist with. More importantly, she was able to help her family in ways that went beyond just financial support. Her steady income meant that Diego could be more selective about the construction jobs he took, choosing work that paid better rather than accepting anything out of desperation. Carmen was able to reduce her house-cleaning clients and focus on the ones who treated her with respect and paid fair wages. Mia's younger brothers, who had been struggling in school during the family's financial crisis, started improving their grades. The stability at home made a huge difference in their ability to focus on their education. Mia even started tutoring them in the evenings, helping them with homework and encouraging them to think about their own futures. But perhaps the most significant change was in the family's relationships with each other. The stress and desperation that had nearly torn them apart began to heal. Diego, who had been angry and defensive during those difficult months, relaxed back into the patient, caring father Mia remembered from her childhood. Carmen smiled more often and started talking about her own dreams again, maybe taking English classes to improve her opportunities. Robert's own healing journey had been more subtle, but just as profound. Having Mia in the house had forced him to engage with life again in ways he'd been avoiding. Couldn't just go through the motions when someone was depending on him for guidance and support. The responsibility had actually been liberating, giving him a reason to care about the future again. His relationship with Lisa had also deepened. Watching him help Mia had shown Lisa a side of her father she'd never seen before, not just as a parent, but as someone who acted on his values, even when it was difficult or inconvenient. It had inspired her own choice to major in social work, with plans to help families navigate crisis situations. "You showed me that one person really can make a difference in someone's life," Lisa had told him during one of their late-night conversations during her winter break. "I want to do that kind of work too." The financial situation had gradually improved as well. Mia insisted on paying rent once she started working, despite Robert's protests that it wasn't necessary. The extra income combined with Robert's more stable emotional state, allowing him to take on additional tutoring work, it finally allowed him to catch up on the medical bills and start rebuilding their savings. But money wasn't the real measure of their success. The real success was visible in smaller, everyday moments. It was Mia laughing at Lisa's terrible jokes during dinner. It was Robert feeling excited about weekend plans instead of just trying to get through each day. It was the three of them working together to plan Lisa's graduation party, contributing ideas and energy to make it special. The graduation party itself had been a revelation for Robert. Watching Mia interact with Lisa's friends, seeing her confidence and warmth, he realized that the shy, desperate young woman who'd cried at the community center 2 years ago had grown into someone completely different. She was still compassionate and hardworking, but now she carried herself with the assurance of someone who knew she could handle whatever life threw at her. Mia's own family had changed too. Diego had started attending the community center's job training programs, working to develop new skills that would make him more competitive in the construction industry. Carmen had enrolled in those English classes she'd dreamed about and was talking about maybe starting her own house cleaning business someday, the arrangement that was supposed to last 6 weeks had naturally evolved into something more permanent. Though everyone understood it was temporary, Mia was saving money for her own apartment and had started talking about continuing her education to become a registered nurse. Lisa would be returning to college in the fall. Robert was beginning to think about what his life might look like when both young women had moved on to their own adventures. One evening in late spring, as they sat on the front porch watching the sunset, Mia brought up something that had been on her mind. "I've been thinking about that man my father wanted me to marry," she said quietly. "I wonder sometimes what my life would have been like if I'd gone through with it." Lisa looked shocked. "Do you ever regret not doing it?" Mia shook her head immediately. "No, never. But I think about the person I was then, how scared and hopeless I felt. I can barely remember feeling that way now." Robert understood what she meant. Sometimes he'd catch glimpses of his old self. the man who'd sat at his kitchen table night after night, overwhelmed by grief and debt, unable to imagine a future worth living. That person felt like a stranger now. I think that's what healing looks like, he said. Not forgetting the hard times, but growing into someone who can handle whatever comes next. As the summer progressed, the three of them began preparing for the changes ahead. Lisa would return to college with a clearer sense of her purpose and goals. Mia would move into her own apartment, close enough to visit regularly, but far enough to build her own independent life. Robert would have the house to himself for the first time in 2 years. But instead of dreading the quiet, he was looking forward to this next chapter. They'd proven something important to themselves and each other, that families could be built in unexpected ways, that helping others was often the best way to help yourself, and that even in the darkest times, there was always the possibility of new beginnings.